This is a gaming PC that I picked up for 150 bucks, which is definitely the cheapest full gaming PC that I've ever purchased. Is it even any good though? Today I want to test it out, see what we got, see if it was actually worth it. So I came across this PC while I was looking for parts for the PC flip up challenge that I'm working on. If that sounds interesting to you, definitely get subscribed and follow along for that. The listing was not confidence inspiring at all, but you know, sometimes that's where the gems are found. So I went for it. Maybe somebody was watching my previous videos because what we have here is another Dell Optiplex build. It's pretty beat up on the outside and it's also missing the front CD drive, but you know what? Sometimes I can vibe with that if that's the aesthetic you're going for. Opening it up is where things get a bit more exciting. It's pretty dusty for one, but there also seems to be some sort of spilled liquid at the bottom of the case. Luckily, it looks like it didn't get to any of the components. We'll have to test that out further, make sure that everything's in working condition. Also, it looks like this poor low-profile GPU has been bent way out of shape just to get it to be able to fit in the Dell Optiplex. Oh, and probably the most concerning thing, looks like the hard drive has been sitting loose in the case. So hopefully the PC wasn't moved around a lot. If the previous owner didn't move it around too much, then it probably survived and is all right, but still makes me a bit nervous, to be honest. But does any of that really matter? Nah. What really matters is what parts we got. So this is a Dell Optiplex 9020 rocking an i5 4590, an MSI GTX 1650, 8 gigabytes of RAM, and then an old, probably slow 250 gig hard drive. The whole build is about the same price that you can pick up just a single GTX 1650 for, so I'll take it. Before testing it out, let's go ahead and clean this baby up. So testing this PC was pretty fun. Right off the bat, I was missing my SSD a ton. Boot times and load times for games were miserable. I ended up needing to reboot the computer a few times to troubleshoot some issues with MSI Afterburner, and each time it would take a good 5 minutes for Steam to verify its updates. Once I was in game though, things improved a lot. In Apex Legends at 1080p on low settings, the first few games had a lot of frame dips and textures loading in slowly, but after about 3 games or so, most of the issues went away, and the game ran well enough for me to get a 9-kill game, which is the most kills I've ever gotten in a single game of Apex. On low settings, it averaged around 110 FPS with 1% low sitting in the 60s. On high settings, the issues with frame drops and textures loading in slowly never really went away. I think with an SSD and 16 gigs of RAM, this probably wouldn't be an issue anymore. Next, I tested out a favorite of mine, Mean Greens, which is one of the greatest games of all time. It's a third-person toy army man game with some super imaginative maps in environments such as the freezer, a kid's play table, a foosball table, and the list goes on. On default settings at 1080p, the game ran wonderfully, with averages in the 130s and 1% lows in the 90s. Y'all should definitely get this game if you don't already have it. Jumping over to Shadow of the Tomb Raider to look at a game that is a bit more demanding. On low settings, the in-game benchmark showed an average of 59. In scenes with lots of NPCs, frame rates seemed to drop a bit compared to scenes where it was just you. The load times in this game were especially slow compared to the other games I tested, so I think this game in particular would benefit from an SSD. Lastly, in Fortnite, there were the typical frame dips in the waiting area and while dropping in, but those usually smoothed out for me after a little bit. Strangely, performance mode struggled to stay consistent. Sometimes it was smooth, sometimes it was almost unplayable. Frame rates were generally high, but there were tons of frame dips, which made it a pretty choppy experience. Love settings, on the other hand, seemed to be the sweet spot for me. At 1080p, I saw an average in the 110s and 120s, with 1% low sitting in the 50s to 70s. Pretty smooth overall and super playable in my opinion. So all in all, this was a pretty good deal, I think, just judging by the performance of the PC. It's not perfect. Boot times on a hard drive and just opening programs was really slow. And I thought maybe I wouldn't notice it that much because I have some games on my own system that run off of a hard drive. But man, like just the system UI, I could tell that it was a lot slower than what I'm used to. If you're okay dealing with that, something like this could be a pretty good starter. But for me personally, I'd be upgrading to an SSD really quick with something like this. Anyways, I do think I'll be using this for the PC flip up challenge that I'm doing, as I mentioned before. And what that is I started out with the Dell Optiplex, I sold that, got some cash, and I started slowly flipping up until hopefully I can get a high-end PC or an RTX 3080 or 4080, something crazy. We'll see where it goes, but I'm pretty excited to utilize this in that challenge. If that sounds interesting to you, make sure to tag along, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, and have a good day.